Dear friends, thank you for joining us for another episode of this special edition of Talking Europe, where we focus on the European Parliament elections. Today we have with us Domènec Ruiz Devesa, who is a member of the European Parliament for Spain and for the Socialist Democratic Party. Domènec, thank you very much for joining for this discussion. We are approaching the European elections. We are concluding the term of the European Parliament that was quite interesting and exciting. A lot of things happened. What do you take away from the past 5 years?
Well, I will say that it has been a very good mandate for Europe, I will say, because we have had to face so many crises, obviously, during these 5 years. And I think, in my assessment, we can maybe go into details later on, but I think on the whole, Europe has been there, right? Both in terms of the substance of the response, which has been very much done in a spirit of solidarity, that contrasts highly, with how, for instance, the euro and the financial crisis was managed. But it has also been a European response, right? So we have acted as Europeans in order to tackle the pandemic, in order to tackle the war in Ukraine, the energy and the inflation crisis, climate change with the Green Deal, so on and so forth.
We are still, though, dealing with many of those crises. The response of Europe has indeed been great, and it has shielded Europeans from the worst effects. But we still have an economic crisis. The war is still ongoing. We're still suffering from the aftermath of the pandemic. What do you think will be the issues that will be in the mind of voters when they go to the polls across the EU in June?
Well, I think you're right that we haven't finished the job, and this is why, indeed, the next mandate will be critical, in my view, to finish the job. And these are the topics that, in my opinion, will be in the minds of voters. Climate change is still accelerating, so certainly we have to do more. Probably we have to focus more on implementation. We have approved a lot of legislation, but now it has to be actually implemented at the ground level. We have to do, I think, also more in support of Ukraine. I think this also worries many Europeans across the continent. We clearly, lately in particular, we have the feeling of too little too late. We didn't manage to get the 1 million rounds of ammunition that we set as a target 1 year ago, more or less, around this time. And now we see this counteroffensive of the Russians, which is in full motion, and we really need to be more effective and deliver faster. We need to expand our industrial production as well. So we have to tackle many things at the same time. It's like running and trying to tie your shoelaces, no?
Indeed, indeed. There is an expectation that the political dynamics, the balance of power within the European Parliament might change after the elections, with shrinking perhaps of the power from the mainstream parties and an increase in the share of the vote from extremist, far-right political forces. Do you anticipate that, and what challenges do you think that might pose for the next European Parliament?
Well, I hope that there is a bit of inflation of the expectations for these extremist, Eurosceptic, Europhobic even parties, because as I was saying before, if you look at these 5 years, of course nothing is perfect, and as I am the first one saying I want more and better. But I think honestly, for the difficulties we face, the record is quite good. But this contrasts with so many tendencies in France, in Germany, in Belgium, in Netherlands, in Italy, even Portugal, when these forces are rising. So I hope we can use these weeks that we have before the election to explain this record to the public, because up until recently we have been legislating in the European Parliament. We haven't been in campaign mode, so we have to do that. And also to explain what we can do and what we want to do in the next 5 years in a positive spirit. Let's not give all the communication space to those that only, have negative messages, that they are also probably using misinformation, disinformation, that they are allied with enemy powers more likely.
Indeed, indeed. And that's something also civil society can help with. Both the European movement and its offices across Europe, but also other civil society actors who are there explaining what the EU does, how it benefits citizens, but also how citizens can have a direct say in those decisions. Maybe that brings me to something we collaborate with quite closely, the Conference on the Future of Europe, which was a unique democratic exercise of participatory democracy that brought citizens at the heart of EU decision-making. How did you experience that? And do you think it's something that should be repeated?
I think so. I think we have either to repeat it, because obviously there are always challenges that we have to decide how to tackle them as Europeans, or even to make something like that kind of permanent in the system. I think this will be good also for the European Parliament. As you know, I'm a member of the European Parliament. And I don't have any, because some of my colleagues, I think not the majority, had this idea of kind of a rivalry between participatory democracy or representative democracy. But I am of the opposite opinion. I think this exercise by which organized civil society like European Movement was part of it, alongside other NGOs, but also randomly selected citizens, with the system of the panels, I think this is an interesting and valuable input into the legislative process. So if we were able to imagine a system in which, at least for some files that we consider particularly relevant, right, we decide to activate this kind of conference on the future of Europe or permanent consultation on European matters, we get the input in our legislative process. I think for the Parliament this will be very helpful, in my view.
Indeed, and it will also make citizens feel that their engagement with democracy doesn't just happen every 4 or 5 years, but it can be more permanent, more structured, more deliberative and participatory, like you said. Now, let's look forward. All the challenges we discussed are there. The EU is dealing with them, trying to resolve them. What do you think will be the best case scenario? If we look 5 years from now, and we're sitting again opposite each other, discussing what the next Parliament has achieved, what will be your ambition? What would you like to see happen in those 5 years?
Well, first of all, I think for the beginning of the mandate, we need to keep the pro-European majority. This means, for instance, in 2009, Social Democrats and Christian Democrats didn't make up the majority anymore, and the Liberals were part of this enlarged majority. So if we need more pro-European groups to be part of the majority, so be it, but this should be the rule. Let's not enlarge in the wrong direction. That would be the first. And second, I will think the priority for the next mandate is to complete the institutional dimension of the European agenda. We have, as you know, as a result of the Conference on the Future of Europe, the conclusions that ask, in fact, for more competencies for the European Union in some key areas, but also a better working of the European democracy itself, with the role of the European Parliament that has to expand, with also better decision-making in the Council, so we are not hijacked by national vetoes. So the European Parliament has made a proposal to reform the treaties, which is still pending, right? Because the European Council has not yet put it in its agenda. And for me, what it should happen in the next mandate is precisely the convention by which we draft this new treaty, which is more democratic, which gives a bigger role for European policies. And also, I would like to have, as an important bonus for 2029, the transnational lists, so we can vote directly the European political parties to the European Parliament and not only the national political parties.
Very interesting indeed. A lot to look forward to and to collaborate also. So thanks for joining us, and we look forward to continuing our mutual ambitions, mission to advance the European project. And for you,
my pleasure.
We look forward to having you again in the next issue of Talking Europe, the special edition on the European elections. Thank you very much.